In the beginning was the stone, and the stone prompted ownership, and ownership a rush, and the rush brought an influx of men of diverse appearance who built railroads through the rock, forged a life of palm wine, and devised a system, a mixture of mining and trading. Northern Station, Friday. Around 7 or 9 in the evening, patience. Friend, you know full well our trains have lost all sense of time. The northern station was going to the dogs. It was essentially an unfinished metal structure gutted by artillery, train tracks, and locomotives that called to mind the railroad built by Stanley. Cassava fields, cut rate hotels, greasy spoons, bordellos, Pentecostal churches, bakeries, and noise engineered by men of all generations and nationalities combined. It was the only place on earth you could hang yourself, defecate, blasphemy, fall into infatuation, and thief without regard to prying eyes. Indeed, an air of connivance hung ever about the place. Jackals don't eat jackals, they pounce. The northern station was going to the docks. It was essentially an unfinished metal structure gutted by artillery, train tracks, and locomotives that called to mind the railroads built by Stanley, cassava fields, cut rate hotels, greasy spoons, bordellos, Pentecostal churches, bakeries, and noise engineered by men of all generations and nationalities combined. It was the only place on earth you could hang yourself, defecate, blasphemy, fall into infatuation, and thieve without regard to prying eyes. Indeed, an air of connivance hung ever about the place. Jackals don't eat jackals, they pounce. They pounce. Okay. On the turkeys and partridges and devoured them. According to the fickle but ever recurring legend, the seeds of all resistance movements, all wars of liberation sprouted at the station between two locomotives, and as if that weren't enough, the same legend claims that the building of the railroad and as if that weren't enough, the same legend claims that the building of the railroad resulted in numerous deaths attributed to tropical disease, technical blunders, the poor working conditions imposed by the colonial authorities, in short, all the usual cliches. Northern Station. Friday around 7 or 9. He had been there nearly 3 hours, jostling with the passers by. As he waited for the train to arrive, Lucien had been at pains to insist on the sense of time, and on these trains that broke all records of derailment, delay, and overcrowding, Requiem had better things to do than wait for the individual who, with the passing of the years, had lost all importance in his eyes. Ever since he had turned his back on Marxism, Requiem called everyone who deprived him of his freedom of thought and action armchair communist and slum ideologues. He had merchandise to deliver, he had. His life depended on it, but the train carrying that son of a bitch, Lucien was dragging its wheels. Northern Station Friday around. Would you care for some company, sir? A girl dressed for a Friday night in a station whose metal structure is unfinished, had come up to him a moment to size up the merchandise. A dull thud, metal structure is unfinished, had come up to him a moment to size up the merchandise. A dull thud, a racket that marked the entrance of the bees. Do you have the time, citizen? Do you have the time, citizen? He had adequately essayed the check, and even imagined her lying on her mean little bed. Despite the half right, he pulled her body against his, asked her name, called me Requiem, stroked his fingers across the young creature's. Then other line, your thighs have the allure of a vodka bottle. Before disappearing into the murky, gloomy gloom of the slimy, sticky crowd. Instructions were required. To designate a place they could chat without distraction, the young woman grew pushy. He sighed, bit his lip, and sputtered. Meet you at Tram 83. Quite pointless. I can what to do unfortunately. Unfortunately. Lips. Your lips are your lips. Hello. Yes, sputtered. Meet you at Tram 83. Quite pointless, of course, for the he had. The young woman grew pushy. He sighed, bit his lip, and sputtered. Meet you at Tram 83. Quite pointless, of course, for he had to take that Lucen home. Requiem shook his head at the very idea, and then there was the merchandise to be delivered to the tourists freshly arrived from Eastern Europe Meanwhile, the racket had increased tenfold. The curse of these trains that arrived at this time of night was that they carried all the scum. Uh, all the scum. ठीक है. Yeah. B. They students or mine workers who couldn't get back to town under their own steam for reasons still unknown. The railroad cut the only university in the region in two. Afternoon classes were disrupted not by the ruckus of the engine but the student gathering their things and leaving the premises. Okay. Because if you miss those trains, you would piss your pants, dear intellectual. The few professors who crashed in the suburbs of the city state slipped their mornings, slipped their more earnings along with their disciples. Their survival instinct can't be learned. It's innate, inbuilt basically. Otherwise, they had been introduced instinct classes at university already. The trains passed without stopping, with which meant the swiftest student had to grab a hold of the beat up rail cars. To grab a hold of the beat, क्या मतलब हुआ भाई इसका? At the train passed without stopping, which meant the swiftest student had to grab a hold of the beat up rail cars. ठीक है, all's fair in love and war. In stark contrast to these impulsive students, with their sense of entitlement, were the brutish diggers who departed and returned on the same contraptions. The former reproached the latter for selling short their dignity to the mining operators and brokers of diverse origin. The latter couldn't care less, displaying through their rotten luck and bodies stiffened with radioactivity that you need not spend time in the classroom with radioactivity. Classroom to work and then clink glasses of ice cool beer after. Some students even scratched out a living in the mines to pay their debts. Requiem began to search for the needle in the haystack. Okay. The scrawny students, overwhelmed by the going ons and angry too, brandished theories like spoils of war, the minor diggers, apocalypse, your lips on my lips. The scrawny students, overwhelmed by the goings on and angry too, brandished theories like the goings on and angry too, brandished theories like spoils of war, the minor diggers or digger miners. It depends. Voiced imprecations. We shall refrain from expressing. Every evening the same opera, they eyed each other up, baked, not baked, barked, traded insults, and even come to a legend suggested the figure of 1,700 dead in the most recent clashes, without counting suffocations and other serious injuries, weary from the noise and the alcohol he had just consumed. Requiem leaned against a pillar, waiting for them to vacate the field. They loitered on the platforms till late into the night. The students with their strike, the minor diggers with their stinking rusty breath. While he had just consumed, Requiem leaned against a pillar, waiting for them to vacate the field. They loitered on the platform till late into the night. The students with their strike, the minor diggers with their stinking rusty breath. I am a free woman, but I am still looking for the man of my dreams. He had already thinking of the girl waiting for him at Tram 83. But after so many years apart, how could he abandon, loosen, and slip into the folds of the night with that doll? The students and the diggers of mines were still squaring off. Okay. The flurry of insults reached its peak. They headed off on the same road to nowhere. Requiem sensed a presence. He raised his eyebrows, loosened in the flesh but skeletal. in the flesh, but skeletal Requiem stepped forward. He realized that his friend has lost all his weight, that an era was on the wane, that a civilization was champing at the bit. Lucien was dressed all in black, the harmony broken only by a red scarf, the wad of papers. The harmony broken only by a red scarf, the wad of papers under his arm, and an imitation leather bag, worn thin, slung over his shoulder, tousled hair, crumpled face, mustache intact, cold gaze, hoarse voice. They embraced without much enthusiasm. The bastard! Don't tell me they have mangled your brains. What's your news? What's about Jacqueline? Long story. How did you get out? I'll tell you. The bastards they. Shall we go? Yes, replied Requiem coldly, no doubt haunted by the girl dressed for a Friday night in a station whose metal structure is unfinished, where dissident rebels, students, and diggers head off on the same road. I'm really sensitive girl. Two fat tears slid down the face of the man who had arrived. Two fat tears slid down the face of the man who had arrived by train in the station, whose metal structure in silence. In silence. They crossed the concourse and the other fragments of the station, where neglected single mamas roamed, along with professors selling their lecture notes, intellectuals reeking of salted fish, and Cuban musicians performing salsa, flamenco, and merengue for no reason at all. 2. First night at Tram 83, night of debauchery, night of boozing, night of beggary, night of premature, night of syphilis, and night of getting by, night of dancing, night that engenders things that exist only between an excess of beer and the intention to empty one's pocket that exhales conflict minerals. This cow dung elevated to a raw material in the beginning was the stone. We walked through the darkness of history. We were the cash cows of a system of thought that profited from our tender age, that crushed us completely. We were a piece of shit. We had an ideal innocence. Innocence, echoed Requiem, bursting into laughter. You really mean innocence? Innocence is cowardice. Cowardice. ठीक है, cowardice. You have to move with the times, brother. You haven't changed a bit. You don't age here. You simply exist. Requiem. It's New Mexico here. Every man for himself and shit for all. Tram 83 was one of the most popular restaurants and hooker bars, its renown stretching beyond the city-state's border. See, Tram 83 and die was a regular refrain of the tourists who blew into town from the four corners of the globe to conduct their business. During the day, they wandered zombie-like through the mining concessions they owned by the dozen, and at night they ended up in Tram 83 to refresh their memory. This gave the place every appearance of a true theatre, if not massive circus. Here's the kind of thing you might hear as background noise. I want to massage you by way, then slowly. Not only at Tram 83, but even at the university and in the mines, didn't hold back from potential clients with the same क्या है PSALMS PSALMS. Inadvertent musicians and elderly and prestigitators prestige prestige prestigitators and Pentecostal preachers and students resembling mechanics and doctors conducting diagnosis in nightclubs and young journalists already retired and transvestites and second foot shoe peddlers and fans and highwaymen and disbarred lawyers and casual laborers and formal transsexual and polka dancers and pirates of the high seas and seekers of political asylum. High Pirates of high seas and seekers of political asylum and organized fraudsters and archaeologists and would-be bounty hunters and modern-day adventurers and explorers searching for a lost civilization and human organ dealer and farmyard philosophers and hawkers of fresh water and hairdressers and shoe shine boys and repairers of spare parts and soldiers, widows, maniacs, and lovers of romance novels and dissident rebels and brothers in Christ and druids and shamans and aphrodisiac vendors and scriveners and purveyors of real fake passports and gun runners and porters and a bric-a-brac traders and mining prospectors short on liquid assets and Siamese twins and Mamluks and carjackers and colonial infantrymen, haruspices and counterfeiters and soldiers and drinkers of milk and self-taught bakers and marabouts and mercenaries claiming to be one of the Bob Dylan's crew and inveterate alcoholics and diggers and militiamen proclaiming themselves masters of the world and poser politicians and child soldiers and peace corps activists gamely tackling a thousand nightmarish railroad construction project or small-scale copper or manganese mining operations and baby chicks and drug dealers and bus girls and pizza delivery guys and growth hormone merchants, all sort of tribes overran Tram 83 in search of good times on the cheap. Would you gentlemen care for some company, barely 16, thrust into a couple of tiny अबे लाइव तो है ना नहीं तो पता चले No मनवा ये मोरा मनवा Hello.
Hello.
Would you gentlemen care for some company? Barely 16, thrust into a couple of tiny corsets, the two girls welcomed them with a ins. Would you gentlemen care for some company? Barely 16. Apocalypse. ठीक है. Would you gentlemen care for some company? Um, Barely 16. Thrust into a couple of tiny corsets. The two girls welcomed them in inscrutable smiles. Requiem settled on one with hair like wooded savanna. You, sir, how much for them? The girl stated a figure. You know the Tokyo stock market is in free fall. She held him by the wrist. Profit equals retail price plus wholesale price minus packaging. A large sign on the tram's frontage stated. Entry inadvisable for the poor, the wretched, the uncircumcised. Historians, archaeologists, cowards, psychologists, cheapstakes, cheapskates, morons, and insolvent. And all of you unlucky enough to be under 14, not forgetting the elected members of the 12th House, penniless diggers, sadistic students, politicians of the Second Republic, historians, know it alls, and snitches. Requiem took the girl's phone number. They entered the establishment. There was nothing special about Tram 83. It was dark all around, like the Lasquas caves. Men, women, children, all with glasses and smokes. At the back, a combo was shamelessly masquerading a Coltrane number. Summertime, no doubt, they headed toward the bar. Two girls with massive shadowing. At the time, nothing. Requiem eyes patrolled the brasseries. One of them was the girl who had accosted him at the station, whose mental structure, do you have the time, hammered the single mamas. Stern and resolute. It was mammoth task to identify all the women who entered Tram 83. They struggled fiercely against aging. Okay. Difficult to venture a distinction between the girls under 16 called baby chicks, the single mamas, or those aged between 20 and 40 and refer to as single mamas even when they don't have children, and the ageless woman whose fixed age begins at 41. None of them wanted to gain a single day. They piled on the makeup from morning till night, wore employed strong arm tactics to entice the clients, and used foreign sounding names such as Marilyn Monroe, Sylvie Wharton, Romy Skender, Bessie Smith, Marlene de Dierich, or Simone de Beauvoir. to make their mark on the world. Go check your papa's watch, Requiem retorted. They took the third table on the left at the corner of the bar, which afforded an unbeatable view over the front doors and the jasmine continuing music and the court restrooms and the bar counter and row of antipathetic, aggressive, and somewhat mature single mamas. In his moments of madness, Requiem would tell anyone who would listen that in order to monitor the comings and goings and the baptism albums, it was preferable to choose a table affording a panorama of the aforementioned areas. To recap, the bar counter, the sanitary facilities, the lone woman, the front door, the musicians, even when they rushed into the dressing room to smoke their marijuana, the waitress, the bus girls, and so on. They remained for several minutes without speaking to each other. It was a feat of courage to attempt a dialogue amid this pandemonium created by deviant music and the yelling of the tourists and other upstarts who identified with the atmosphere, waxing ecstatic, grooving, whispering, howling, and pulling out money. They threw in the directions of the musicians. Give me a real cuddle. Do you have the time? I give you my body. Chain me up, maybe. All of which fueled the fervor of the band. एडिट नहीं कर सकते क्या बोल रहे Apocalypse, your lips and my lips. All of which fueled the fervor of the band and con- consequently the lynching of the beautiful melody. In the labyrinth of the city state, you don't listen to jazz to get a whiff of sugarcane or reconnect with Negro consciousness or savor the beauty. Savor, savor with the beauty of the notes. You listen to jazz because you have to listen jazz. When you make your bed on banknotes, when you deliver your merchandise daily, when you manage an extraction plant, when you are cousin to the dissident general, when you keep a little mistress who pins you to your bed in a dizzy haze. Jazz is a sign of nobility. It's the music of the rich and the newly rich of those who build this beautiful broken world. Such people don't listen to rumba, which they find dirty, primitive, and unfit for the ear. Between rumba and jazz lies an ocean, they say. You don't listen to jazz the way you would fling yourself into a Zairian spiced rumba. Rumba. Jazz is above all a precipitous slope, a cliff you can only climb if you possess a notion of its origin, its development, its major figures. Jazz is no longer the story of the Negroes. Only tourists and those who master money know the foundation of this music. It's the only identification for a certain Bor bourgeoisie, the bourgeoisie of the 11th hour. Consequently, when the musicians get jazzing, all of Tram 83 stirs from the sleeping sickness, the slightest saxophone, and it's the great masquerade. The diggers and the students adopt the manners of the tourist. They watch, smile, raise their beer glasses, walk, blaze a trail to the dance floor, hail the waitresses and bus girls in the manner of the tourist, take on the haughty bearing of samurai, the gestures and attitudes of Maharaja, the poise of the Dalai Lama, the honeys, the waitress, and the bus girls don't let themselves be browbeaten. Browbeaten. Smiles like the Queen of England, they mime imaginary empresses. Jazz is the only lever used by all the riff-raff of Tram 83 to switch social class as one would subway cars. Me, you love. It's me, make love to me. You and me, love make. The two companions looked at each other without a word. Lucien was amazed at the bureaucratic slowness of the service. Requiem held the password, the rules of the road, the attached document, the riddle, the waitresses, and Buzzgirl tried to make themselves seem important by dragging their feet, sulking and aggravating the clientele. Do you have the time? Insisted other young women standing around. Come to assist the first pair, chest jutting. Have the time? Insisted other young women standing around. Come to assist the first pair, chest jutting, ready and willing to administer massage sessions, cuddle, and other ingredients of the night. A genuine post colonial couple sat beside them. The man, who looked about 20, his hands all over the bust of a 78-year-old lady, a Requiem confirmed, recited his bravery. You have a smile that perturbs me deeply. I love you day and night. I love you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. He could only be a student or a civil servant in a small state firm gone bankrupt. It's a waste to be young in this part of Equatorial Africa. Equatorial Africa. The under 35s are potentially embittered. The under 35s are potentially embittered. Xenophobes, crooks, hucksters of using any ploy, be it jazz or a balancing marriage to escape the prison that is poverty. Okay, escape the prison that is poverty, the phenomenon of rebalancing of matching and of corporeal integration.